This is Houston, a city full of endless traffic jams, relentless floods, and roads so dangerous most wouldn't dare walk them. Located in the state of Texas, Houston consistently ranks as one of the worst designed cities in the world. And if you've ever been here, you can see why. But it wasn't always this way. Houston used to be a city of opportunity. Oil made it rich. The ship channel turned it into a global port. And when NASA set up shop, Houston became the home of America's space missions. For a while, it really felt like this city had no limits. So what went wrong? How did the place once known for big dreams turn into the poster child for bad city design? In this video, we're going to look at how Houston grew, the problems built into its streets and neighborhoods, and the lessons it could learn from other U.S. cities. But before we talk about fixes, we need to see how it all started. Houston was once a city built on promise. Oil wealth fueled its rise. The ship channel opened it to the world. And when NASA arrived, Houston became the face of America's space ambitions. Lamps stretched endlessly, and for a moment, it seemed like the city had no limits. That sense of freedom shaped everything. While other cities wrote zoning codes to control growth, Houston chose another path. Anyone could build almost anything, almost anywhere. At first, it looked like an advantage. Developers moved fast, businesses opened without hurdles, and families bought homes at prices that seemed impossible. Another booming metros. Houston sold the image of a city where rules never stood in the way of ambition. But the foundation was shaky. By the late 20th century, the city's form was already fraying. Suburbs spread far into the prairie, and storms exposed how fragile the ground beneath Houston really was. Entire neighborhoods rose, and floodplains because development always came first, and drainage came later. What started as flexibility hardened into disorder. By the time the new century arrived, the very policies that once drove growth had become burdens. Choices made for speed left Houston carrying flaws too heavy to escape. Those flaws set the stage for the design failures that define the city today. And that's really the heart of the story. Design, the way something is built, shapes how people experience it, whether it's a city or a piece of technology. That's why I've been fascinated by the Wow Cube. The moment you pick it up, it feels different. Instead of a flat screen, you interact by twisting, tilting, and shaking it. With 24 displays reacting together in real time, the physical movement blends seamlessly with the digital response, and that combination makes it feel like a step forward in how we think about interfaces. Inside, you'll find games, puzzles, and even useful widgets like timers and lamps. And because the platform is open, developers are constantly building new apps for it. It's one of those devices that sparks curiosity immediately, because every turn of the cube reveals something new. What makes Wow Cube exciting is its design. It's built for people who want to see where technology can go next. People who enjoy exploring fresh ways of interacting with information. Click the link in the description to join the waitlist so you can purchase by Christmas. Big thanks to Wow Cube for supporting the channel. Now let's get back to Houston. 1. No zoning. Houston is the only major city in America without a zoning code, and that decision set the tone for everything that followed. With no rules for warehouses, stores, or factories could go, land was developed in whatever way seemed profitable at the time. That's why a quiet residential street can sit beside a warehouse, or why a nightclub can open down the block from an elementary school for developers. It was perfect. They didn't have to wait years for approvals or navigate endless hearings. Projects rose quickly, and housing stayed relatively cheap compared to other booming metros. For decades, many celebrated. This is Houston's advantage. Proof that freedom meant prosperity, but would look like freedom soon revealed its cracks. Builders focused on quick wins. Instead of balanced growth, subdivisions appeared without corner stores, schools, or reliable drainage. The city became a patchwork of disconnected neighborhoods, stitched together by whatever project broke ground next. And once that pattern of scattered development was in motion, it expanded outward, pulling the city farther into the prairie, and setting the stage for the next chapter of Houston's growth, relentless sprawl to sprawl explosion. In the decades after World War II, Houston leaned into expansion, with one tool above all: annexation. The city absorbed enormous amounts of land, pushing its boundaries farther out than almost any other American city. Every new annexation created fresh space for subdivisions, each laid out with wide streets, cold, the sacks and parking baked into the design. For families, the appeal was obvious. Bigger houses at lower prices drew people in, and the promise of endless space became part of Houston's identity. But that space came with distance. Schools ended up miles from homes, jobs clustered in far-off business districts, and shopping centered down highways instead of neighborhood streets. Daily life spread so far apart that a car became the only realistic way to connect it all. Distance also carried hidden costs. Roads had to stretch across the prairie, utilities had to be extended, and drainage had to be dug in areas that once absorbed water. Naturally, maintaining all of this spread-out infrastructure drained city resources. But leaders kept approving new projects because expansion looked like growth on paper. And the farther Houston stretched, the more it relied on a single system to hold it all together. Highways 3. Traffic gridlock. Highways were Houston's answer to sprawl. Every time congestion built up, the solution was simple. Add more lanes. Nowhere is this clearer than on the Katy Freeway. Expanded to as many as 26 lanes, it became the widest freeway in the world, with a $2.8 billion price tag meant to finally untangle traffic. For a brief moment, it worked. Commutes ceased and drivers felt like the investment had paid off. But the relief didn't last. New lanes made it easier for developers to push housing even farther into the prairie, which meant more cars soon filled the road. Commute times climbed again, often surpassing what they had been before the expansion. This cycle, known as induced demand, became Houston's defining pattern. Each expansion looked like progress, but guaranteed heavier congestion in the future. Residents found themselves driving longer distances on wider roads, only to spend more time stuck in traffic. And all of that pavement magnified one of Houston's oldest and most dangerous problems: flooding for flooding crisis. Houston's landscape has always been flood-prone. The city sits on flat, low-lying ground where bayous naturally meander through prairies and wetlands for centuries. Those prairies absorbed heavy rains like sponges, but as subdivisions replaced grasslands with concrete and asphalt, that protection vanished. Rainwater now races off rooftops and parking lots straight into BYUs and storm drains. At first, engineers believed they could keep pace. Channels were dug, reservoirs were built, and roads were designed to double his drainage routes. But storms kept coming harder, while development never slowed down. Tropical Storm Allison in 2001 left 70,000 homes underwater. The Memorial Day and Tax Day floods of the 2010s added thousands more. And in 2017, Hurricane Harvey dumped 50 inches of rain on the city in just a few days, damaging or destroying more than 200,000 homes. What Harvey revealed was devastating but unsurprising. Houston had allowed entire neighborhoods to rise inside floodplains, often marketed as safe until the water arrived. Protection always lagged behind development, and families only discovered the risk once their homes filled with water. Even after disasters on that scale, Houston didn't abandon its car. First model cars remain the only real option, which exposed another flaw in the city's design: a transit system too small to compete. 5. Public transit collapse while billions flowed into highways. Houston's transit system fell behind. The bus network covers wide ground, but routes are slow and designed mainly to funnel people into downtown. Trips across the suburbs can take hours. Light rail arrived in 2004, raising hopes that Houston might build a system to rival it. But the network remained tiny. A few lines served narrow corridors while most of the metro was untouched. Plans for expansion ran into political fights, budget shortfalls, and opposition from leaders who saw rail as unnecessary in a car-first city. That left transit trapped in a loop because service was limited. Ridership stayed low because ridership was low. Funding stayed scarce. And without funding, the system never grew enough to compete with driving. The result is daily life. In Houston, owning a car isn't optional, it's survival. And when millions of people depend on cars, the design of streets takes on life or death consequences. 6. Safety failures. Houston streets were built for speed, not for people. Arterial roads cut through neighborhoods with 6 or more lanes. Few crosswalks and sidewalks that often and suddenly, slip lanes let cars turn without slowing much, while wide lanes encourage drivers to push well past the posted limit. This design shows up in the numbers. Hundreds of people die in crashes every year, and pedestrian fatalities have reached record highs. The danger is baked into roads that treat safety as secondary to flow. For residents who walk, bike, or ride transit, this creates constant risk. Even short trips mean crossing intersections that feel more like freeway ramps than community streets. Living without a car in Houston is both unsafe and not realistic, and that unsafe design affects more than commutes. It filters down into how neighborhoods themselves are built and how people connect with each other. 7 neighborhood consequences. Zoom into the neighborhood scale, and Houston's design flaws become personal subdivisions, emphasized garages and cold fits. This acts while retail clusters along massive arterials behind seas of parking. Few streets encourage walking, and almost none create real gathering places. That layout shapes daily life. Neighbors rarely cross paths outside of cars. Social life depends on private backyards, malls, or long drives to visit France. The corner store doesn't exist because the corner was designed for traffic flow, not community. The trade-off is clear. People get more square footage at home, but they lose the connections that come from shared spaces. And when floods or disasters hit, the lack of a strong community fabric makes recovery slower and harder. Houston grew outward quickly, but it never grew together. The city offered space, but not stability. It built speed on paper, but not safety in practice. And taken as a whole, These choices explain why Houston today is often called the worst designed city in America. And by the early 2000s, traffic deaths were climbing, floods were costing billions, and commuters were spending more time in their cars than at home. Leaders began rolling out programs that looked like turning points. The city launched Vision Zero in 2019, promising to eliminate traffic deaths by 2030. Engineers tested RD diets downtown, cutting lanes and adding protected bike paths. Early results showed real promise. Crashes on Bagby Street dropped by almost half after redesign. Voters also stepped in. In 2019, Houstonia NSE approved a $7.5 billion bond package to expand transit. It funded new bus rapid transit corridors, extensions of the light rail, and upgrades to the bus system for a moment. It seemed like the city was ready to diversify beyond highways. Land use reforms followed. Minimum lot sizes inside the I-610 loop were reduced, which allowed smaller homes and denser townhome development. Some neighborhoods began to see pockets of walkable density with Rest Johnson apartments growing side by side. Houston also experimented with complete streets policies that required new projects to consider pedestrians, bikes, and transit alongside cars. But change never came easy. The Vision Zero program struggled with follow-through. Political turnover slowed projects, and by 2024, the new administration rolled back several safety-focused redesigns. Some leaders argued RD diets caused more congestion even as data showed they reduced crashes. Transit expansion also stalled, with bus rapid transit routes facing delays and retail extensions cut back. And while lot size reform added density in central neighborhoods, it did little to reshape the sprawling suburbs where most Houstonians still live. In other words, progress arrived in fragments. Some streets became safer, some districts more walkable, and some transit options more reliable. But the overall system stayed the same. The highway-first mindset kept its grip, and each effort at reform, delighted with decades of car-based growth already set in concrete, that leaves Houston in a strange place. The tools for improvement exist, but they've been applied unevenly, which raises the question, if Houston has struggled to escape its past, what would it look like if a city had actually played on the opposite way from the start? If Houston is the example of what happens without a plan, Portland shows what happens when a city sets one. In the 1970s, Oregon passed a law that required cities to draw an urban growth boundary, a hard line where development had to stop. That one rule changed the trajectory of Portland instead of spilling endlessly into farmland and floodplain. Growth had to stay compact with sprawl contained. Portland focused on what filled the space inside. Neighborhoods were designed to mix housing with shops, offices, and schools so people didn't have to drive for every trip. Sidewalks were included on most streets. Bike lanes spread across the grid. Public squares and local businesses gave residents places to gather without getting on the highway. The city wasn't perfect, but the design made life easier to navigate. Transit became the backbone that tied it all together. Light rail linked suburbs to downtown, while streetcars and buses kept neighborhoods connected because land use supported it. Because people actually lived near stations. Ridership grew. Portland showed that when you invest in alternatives to driving and design the city around them, those alternatives can thrive. The results speak clearly. Portlanders doctor fewer miles, spent less time stuck in traffic, and have more options for how to get around. Neighborhoods feel more connected, and while housing affordability is now a challenge, the city's framework for walkability and transit gives it flexibility to adapt. Portland demonstrates the power of rules that shape growth. By drawing a boundary, building density, and prioritizing transit, Portland created a system where people have choices. Houston, with its patchwork design, has almost none. And that is the lesson. Cities don't have to be locked into car dependence and sprawl. The tools exist, and another American city has already proven they can work. Houston was once a city built on promise. Oil wealth made it an energy capital. The ship channel turned it into a global port, and NASA gave it a place in history. But the freedom that fueled its rise also carried its downfall. Growth without limits delivered sprawl, flooding, and traffic that no highway could fix. What began as flexibility hardened into chaos, leaving the city trapped in its own design. Yet solutions exist. Europe has shown how transformation can be built smarter, safer, and more sustainable. So what can America learn from them? Click here to find out.